Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Wildcard Devy podcast. I'm your host for the evening, Phil. You'll see I'm riding solo. Jack is currently on his holidays, enjoying himself. But it's exciting times, guys. We are less than 30 days from the college football season starting. So we promised you that we'd take you through the different conferences and give you a little bit of a preview from maybe a bit of a Devy scope and let you know how it's going. So tonight we're going to start off with the conference I know best as an Alabama fan, and I'm going to talk you through what's going to happen this year and the type of players you can expect to look out for from the SEC. Before we do though, should let you know, feel like it's time, we've had a transfer portal exit. Jord has decided to step away and transfer away from the team just for the time being. So I just wanted to take the moment just to put it on record before we go any further and get into tonight's show to say thanks for all your help, mate. We appreciate everything you've done to help get us started and get us launched. We wouldn't have been able to do it without you. Your knowledge is like second to none. And obviously, you really give me and Jack a good handle getting this thing started. So we appreciate you, brother. You know where we are if you ever want to drop back in and rejoin the team. Okay. Listen, that being said, it is time to get into the show. Let's have a look at this year's SEC. So if you were already aware, the division or the conference rather, has expanded up to 16 teams from 14, with the addition this year for the first time of the Texas Longhorns and the Oklahoma Sooners. So lots of players to get into. And listen, we know that some of the best football in college football is played in the SEC. Okay, there are lots and lots of elite prospects who join these schools, and we're going to take you through team at a time. All I'm going to do, really, just one team at a time. Bring up the type of players that we might want to look at from a Devy perspective, players to keep an eye out for, what we might be able to expect from some of these guys. And yeah, just put a couple of names out there. A lot of these names you'll already know. Hopefully we can help you identify some sleeper picks maybe. And I promise you, I am going to find someone in every single SEC team for you to keep an eye on this forthcoming season. And that wasn't easy, particularly when you look at a couple of the sides that we'll deal with a little bit later. Okay, but let's start with Tennessee. Okay, Tennessee are a good side to watch. Explosive, lightning offense that Josh Heupel's put in there. Some of the prospects to watch then. Nico Iamaleava. Okay, check my pronunciation. I think I've done that right. Iamaleava. Okay, listen. As well as him, okay, we have shouted out a couple of the 2027 class in Peyton Lewis and Mike Matthews in our running back and wide receiver shows. They've also got a couple of other good running backs on roll in Dylan Sampson and Cam Seldon, who I think are going to go on to have productive college careers and be good Devy assets. And then Squirrel White, a depth receiver this year, probably looking at day 3 draft capital. But I want to spend a couple of moments just to get us started talking about Nico. I'm not going to do the full name again from now on for this. He is Nico. Okay, 6'6", mobile, dual threat QB. The MVP of his only career start in last year's Citrus Bowl when the Vols shut out Iowa 35-0. And in that game, he went off for just 178 yards through the air, but 4 touchdowns. Okay. He also had 71 rushing yards on 20 carries and 3 TDs last year altogether. Listen, he's amongst the best tools. So obviously, these guys going into their sophomore season, if you look at the QBs that he was up amongst it against, your Arch Mannings of this world, he had the best physical tools amongst that crop of incoming 2023 QBs. Strong arm with a whip-like throwing motion. Like, he just throws the ball effortlessly downfield. It's great to watch. It's got a twitchy release. And he's got enough athleticism to evade pass rushes and pick up yards on the ground when it comes. Listen, Joe Milton's now backing up Drake May in New England, and this job is Nico's. He is primed to start, and he could be about to absolutely go off. he looks like he's going to be a star in the making. Your only chance of grabbing him now is in a startup. And he's going with first round draft capital in startups. Absolutely no problems there. He, like I said, the kid's going to be a star. He's going to be very, very expensive for you to acquire. Your best bet's already been and gone, I'm afraid. But yeah, he's going to be exciting to watch. Tennessee have got this kind of gimmicky kind of spread, lightning fast offense, and he's going to be in the driving seat of it. So look out for him, enjoy it, because you're going to be rooting for him on Sundays sooner rather than later. Moving on then, we'll go to everyone's surprise package from last year, the Missouri Tigers. Okay, perhaps not as many Devy stars to watch. All right, obviously we all know about Luther Burden, possibly the wide receiver one in this incoming 2025 class. Brady Cook is quarterback. Will he get a draft profile? Will he get draft capital? Probably not. He's available in a lot of my rookie drafts at the moment, or a lot of Devy drafts that I've been involved in, often going unclaimed. Listen, a good season for Brady Cook might just fire him into that kind of day 3 UDFA kind of practice squad type guy. But listen, he played well last year, and he really, really showed that he'd come on and developed. There's an interesting 4-star wide receiver in Courtney Crunchfield, who's an incoming freshman. Don't know too much about his tape, but he's one that I've been told I need to keep my eye on. So, like the bringer of all good news, I'll spread that to you. But interestingly as well, the other guy that is worth keeping an eye on, I wouldn't go out and draft him now. But he's well worth keeping an eye on, is Sam Horn. Okay, so when Brady Cook does leave, that job looks like it's going to go to Sam Horn. Interestingly, before last season, right, Brady Cook hadn't put a great deal on tape whatsoever, and there were a lot of people calling for Sam Horn, then a freshman, to start above Brady Cook. He's a Missouri-based kid, kind of home born and bred, and he's also an elite baseball prospect. He was kind of touted when they actually got him in and got him through the door and signed on at Mizzou as the savior of Missouri football, which is quite a lofty goal. I said last year that I thought Brady Cook was the player. Eli Drinkwitz listened. No, he didn't listen to me, but he had, was of the same mindset that with the kind of uneven prospects of their season, Brady Cook was the way to go. And then they came on leaps and bounds. There was so much fun to watch last year. But Sam Horn is very much waiting in the wings when Brady Cook does decide it's time to move on, either to the league or to sell cars, something like that. And that'll be when Sam Horn steps in. So just keep an eye on that name. He could be a buzzy name this time next year. But I do just want to spend a couple of moments to talk about Luther Burden. My goodness, he's fun to watch. And like I say, could well be the wide receiver one in 2025 between him and Ted McMillan. Last year, 1,212 yards and 9 TDs on 86 receptions. Right, what stands out when you put on the tape is the acceleration and finishing skills. He climbs effortlessly over coverage to bring the ball home. And then, if he gets the ball in his hands, he's a catch and run threat. He will absolutely destroy pursuit angles, and he's got elite after the catch kind of traits. Combine his athleticism with his physicality, and you'll just see that's why he wins more often than not. Interesting little tidbit, he was one of only 5 guys in the FBS last year with at least 22 receptions of over 20 yards. Like the comparisons to Debo, I've heard a lot. I've also heard comps to Jamar Chase at LSU, not perhaps the Jamar Chase we've seen since he's got into the league with Cincinnati, but at LSU, Chase just out-athletics and out-physical people. He was so dominant in the air, and that's kind of what you see when you do watch Luther Burden. Listen, he's not the perfect prospect. He needs to improve his work outside the numbers. He's much better over the kind of middle of the field at the moment. But yeah, he's a talented guy. Like I said, everyone knew about him coming in. He has certainly not disappointed. He's going to be going with round 1 draft capital in your fantasy drafts and the NFL draft next year. No questions about it. Okay, right. Moving on then, let's have a little look at the Georgia Bulldogs. And as you will see, there is a lengthy name there. They have got talent all over the field, which is absolutely no surprise. Okay. More importantly, they've got a pipeline of it coming through over the next 3 years. If you kind of think in Devy of 3-year cycles for all the guys that tend to be on roll, we've got elite players coming out each year. I think it's really interesting. Obviously, we've talked about Carson Beck at length, potential to be the QB1 in a class where right now people are struggling to set themselves apart. We think a lot of him here on the pod, both Jordan, Jack, and I. We've all said previously that he is an elite prospect with great tools to build on. Obviously, one of the big things for me was the absurdly high passing percentage. He's got a completion rating of over 70% for last season, which stands him in really, really good stead to be safe with the ball moving into the league. Really, really strong at running back. They've got running backs in all 3 years. You heard me rave about Nate Fraser in the incoming running back class show that we did. And Trevor Etienne has obviously been brought across from Florida to be the guy this year. We've spoken about him at length. So I did just want to shout out a couple of other names on there. A couple of underrated and sleeper wide receivers in Dylan Bell and Colby Young, who've both got the opportunity to forge themselves as major weapons in their passing game this year, having lost their top 3 receivers to the league. A couple of good tight end prospects this year in Oscar Delp, a really well-rounded tight end prospect, and Ben Urasek, the transfer from Stanford, really good pass-catching tight end. But the one I want to go back to running back, and I just want to have a little bit of a look at Roderick Robinson. Obviously, Trevor Etienne's been brought in this year to be the guy, I am sure. But Roderick Robinson, first eligible in 2026, shouldn't be ignored. Played in 5 games last year and totaled 196 yards and 2 TDs on 24 carries, so 8.2 yards a carry. He is a strong and decisive runner between the tackles, right? And at the moment, I think you'll be drafting with guys who perhaps don't watch the tape and don't know these prospects and just draft players because they're a running back at Georgia. This kid is well worth your draft capital. If you've got to get above someone to do it, he's going to be another... he's going to the league, no doubt about it. I'm sure when it's his turn, he'll shine in Athens and make the league. So just make sure you've got him on your radar. You should see more snaps this year, although we expect Etienne to be the lead guy. Moving on to Florida, some interesting prospects to watch here. I don't want to talk too much about DJ Lagway. Obviously, he was the jewel in the crown of the incoming QB recruiting class this year. We discussed him at length on that QB profile show. If you want to know more about DJ Lagway and the dual threat that he is, go back and watch that. Again, other names to watch out for: Elijah Badger. Transfer from Arizona State, has transferred to Florida this year with the hope of seeing more touches and kind of boosting that draft stock. Buzzy name a year or so ago, but maybe needs to step up his profile this year. And Eugene Wilson, elite change of direction and short area quickness, showed out last year as a freshman with 61 receptions and 6 TDs. Funnily enough, Dad won 2 Super Bowls as part of the New England Patriots teams in that kind of early Tom Brady, Bill Belichick era. But the one to maybe pick up on here is Jaden Barr. We didn't talk about him a great deal. In fact, I don't think we spoke about him at all in our freshman running back show last episode. But Jaden Barr is highly rated and kind of one of that class behind the main 3 guys that we talked about. And interestingly, he might just be running into a situation where an injury to the guy that was sitting atop their depth chart in Montreal Johnson could just help Jaden Barr see more snaps and more game time as an incoming freshman. It's kind of like what was missing for Etienne. Montreal Johnson and Etienne were split constantly. So him moving out looked like Montreal Johnson might take the lion's share and Jaden Barr get drip fed in as and when. But this injury should kind of catapult him into some elite snaps, depending on what happens as the season goes on. So watch out for Jaden Barr. Moving on to LSU. Obviously, LSU are an interesting team this year. Last year, obviously, spearheaded by the rushing attack with Jaden Daniels and the passing game with Jaden Daniels as well, who went on to win the Heisman and get drafted number 2 overall. Backed up by 2 elite wide receivers who both got first-round draft capital in Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas. Those guys are gone. So LSU's offense this year has changed somewhat. That doesn't mean we should ignore him. Garrett Nussmeier is going to get the chance to be, to put himself in the 2025 QB conversation. I'll be honest, I'm not sure how good a prospect he is, but he's going to be playing in an elite offense in an elite conference with the chance to maybe improve that draft stock. If you've taken a gamble on him this year, I don't blame you. It was worth the punt. We'll wait and see what comes of it. I'll be honest with you there. Interestingly, I've not put on a single wide receiver in terms of their key Devy prospects that they've got on roll at the moment. They didn't really have anything backed up in the pipeline to support the outgoing Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas Jr. Hence the reason they've brought in CJ Daniels, Kyron Lacey, and Xavier Thomas all in the transfer portal this offseason. Okay, all as kind of senior transfers. The one interesting prospect who's a bit more of a sleeper, again, I wouldn't go out there to draft him right now, but you might just want to know the name. Shelton Sampson Jr. Is a redshirt freshman, 6'4", quick, and a potential name to watch out for. He might be the one that was on roll last season who sets himself apart amongst the incoming transfer wide receivers. Couple of running backs to keep an eye on then, Caleb Jackson and Caden Durham, both interesting prospects. And listen, as a sleeper, I really like Mason Taylor, the tight end. Trades Green, the 2027 tight end, incoming freshman, was one of the higher ranked freshman tight ends this season. But I like Mason Taylor. NFL bloodlines, obviously, son of Jason Taylor, the Dolphins defensive end from the 90s, early 2000s. Just a bit of a jack of all trades, good in the pass game, good inline blocker as well. When you watch him, kind of reminds me of Jake Ferguson. And we've seen just the career that Jake Ferguson is going on to have, and looks like he could be one of the better tight ends in the league. There's no reason that Mason Taylor can't do the same. Perhaps didn't get the target share he wanted last year going up against Neighbors and Thomas, but he should profile and feature more heavily in their passing offense this year. Obviously, the big one, can't really mention him at the moment because there's no point in previewing him for this season, but always keeping an eye on college recruiting. 5-star plus recruit, wide receiver Decorium Moore, the number 1 recruiting wide receiver in this recruiting cycle, has committed to LSU. So he is one that you definitely want to keep an eye on for next season. Okay, I think that's why they felt pretty good going with the whole transfer route this year to bolster that wide receiver room. Moving on to Kentucky, Devy prospects to watch. Brock Vandegrift, interesting QB transfer. Transfers out of Georgia after he lost the starting job to Carson Beck. He sat for a year on the bench at Georgia, but has decided to test the portal this year and goes to Kentucky. He was a 5-star recruit. Interesting prospects. Will be good to see how what should be improved quarterback play for Kentucky this year impacts the main Devy prospects, all right, which is obviously Barry and Brown and Dane Key. Barry and Brown in particular will be a name that is gone in a lot of your Devy drafts. Elite kick returner, an electric playmaker with the ball in his hands. He's broken all sorts of school records and SEC records as a returner, and his return ability alone will see him into the league. Definitely needs to round out his skill set in terms of being in the league. He's the type of guy that you'll have to scheme touches for because he is very slight. But, we're seeing guys do it. Tank Dell's doing it. Obviously Xavier Worthy, with his elite speed and playmaking ability, has gone to the Chiefs this year. There is a path for Barry and Brown to be successful in the league, but mainly as a kick returner. So if your Devy leagues reward returns, he could be one to absolutely take advantage of the new kickoff rules coming in play this season. And then just as a sleeper, I really liked this kid's tape coming out of high school. Anthony Brown-Stevens. Played all 13 games last year and perhaps worryingly only had 5 receptions. But with the improved QB play this year, hopefully coming from Brock Vandergriff, he kind of profiles as a true slot receiver and should see a more expanded role this year. So just keep an eye on that name. I pretty much guarantee you he's not going to be drafted at the moment. And again, I'm not saying you need to right now, but you want to watch for that increased profile if it comes this year. Have him on your boards ready as a potential draftable prospect next year. This next school's interesting because I'm going to talk about Texas A&M. And Texas A&M over the last few years have been, they've recruited at a really high level. But they've had issues keeping guys. Obviously, Evan Stewart was one of their major wide receivers, and he's left and gone to Oregon this year. And when you look around at their Devy prospects now, there's not a great deal left. Obviously, Devon Achane is performing at the Miami Dolphins. And Evan Stewart's out. Like, guys of note, really, like Connor Weigman. We've spoken about Connor Weigman previously on my solo show when I looked at the 2025 QB class using the Parcells rules. Connor Weigman is a talented quarterback, but he has had an injury-riddled couple of years and really not put a great deal on tape right now. And I'm watching these way too early 2025 NFL mock drafts that are kind of showcasing Connor Weigman as a first-round QB. That makes me nervous right now. Guys, he is talented. He has got potential. What I would rather see is him play the 2025 season healthy and then come back for the 2026 season and put enough on tape to really showcase his talent. I am very, very wary of one-year breakout players. And, even if Connor Weigman has a great year this year, has he really put it on tape and has he showcased the leadership skills and the ability to do it over a prolonged period of time? It just leaves me feeling pretty nervous and pretty antsy. I would prefer to look at Weigman as a class of 2026 QB where he could genuinely deserve to be mentioned amongst the first round of the NFL draft. The other guy I want to shout out is Ruben Owens, 5-star running back who should see increased snap time this year in the backfield there at College Station. Listen, Ruben Owens is our first official Fantasy Wildcard Devy brand guy. We are Team Ruben Owens, mainly because last year, whilst we were hammering the Twitter sphere or X kind of landscape with our content in season, showing clips and highlights, we tweeted out a post of one of Ruben Owens' 2 touchdowns that he scored, and he retweeted it and liked it. And for us, that makes him a brand guy. So more power to you, Ruben Owens. We are pulling for you this season. As a 5-star running back recruit, incoming freshman last year, he was likely taken in the mid-rounds of your drafts, but he didn't do a great deal last year. Go and have a dabble. Look where he's gone. Look at which owner has him on the draft boards. Maybe look at scooping him up. Throw an offer out there. He's a talented guy, and like I say, should see increased production this year. Moving on then, and looking at the South Carolina Gamecocks. Listen, this is really interesting because it's all change. From a Devy perspective for the guys that we wanted to watch. Last year, we were very interested to see the progression of Spencer Rattler, and we were interested to see his elite receiving prospect in Antoine Juice Wells, who you guys know by now I absolutely love. Listen, Juice Wells struggled with injury all season. He's now transferred out. He's going to be playing another college season at Ole Miss, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. To his credit, Spencer Rattler managed to somehow stay alive behind some awful O-line play, spent most of the season running for his life, but still put plenty on tape with improved decision-making that got him drafted at the start of day 3 by the New Orleans Saints, and he is already pulling up trees there. The guy that's going to step into that role that Spencer Rattler leaves is Lenoris Sellers. Really interesting QB prospect, true dual threat. Whether he makes a really good go of it, who knows? But he's an intriguing prospect. And I saw him get a lot of kind of mid-round draft capital this year for people taking a chance on that next playmaking threat at quarterback. Let's see how his season goes. They need improved O-line play. And he will, luckily for him as a rusher, it will play to his strengths because they've not obviously got a lot of receiving weapons with Xavier Legette also going to the league. But the one guy they do have, the really, really intriguing Nick Harbaugh. What an intriguing prospect he is. Now, we've mentioned him in the past, but just let me refresh your memory. Recruited as a 5-star athlete, he hadn't determined a position coming out of high school. But this guy is a physical freak of nature. So much so that he's the only ever back-to-back winner or number one ranked player on Bruce Feldman's annual Freaks list, where they look across all the positions at college football, all the conferences, and look for the most freaky elite athletes. Again, this guy is 6'5" and 242 pounds. Recruited as an athlete, he'd played defensive end and a bit of wide receiver at high school, but there was a real kind of air of intrigue about where he was going to play for South Carolina. And they've used him as a kind of wide receiver tight end hybrid, which was music to our ears as Devy players, because this guy is fast, insanely fast, freakishly fast. To put it on in perspective, like I said before, 6'5", 242 pounds. That is a very similar size profile and physical makeup to what Calvin Johnson played in the NFL at. Now then, Nick Harbaugh didn't spend a lot of time during doing spring football and off-season kind of programs this year because he was part of the South Carolina Gamecocks track team. Nick Harbaugh runs the 100 meters and clocked an official time this year at an NCAA track meet of 10.1 seconds for the 100 meters and 20.2 seconds for the 200 meters. They are official times on record. That is Calvin Johnson's size and Tyreek Hill's speed. That is elite physical traits. And he played sparingly as a rookie. He's as a freshman, he's a very, very raw prospect. But the guys rave about his leadership. The coaching team down in South Carolina absolutely rave about his potential. And if they work on his hands, if they work on his passing and his route running, this kid could absolutely blow up the next level. Listen, we've seen height, weight, speed combo guys make the league before and fall flat on their face. But this kid's height, weight, speed is different. And if he can put together some pass catching nuance and really work on those kind of more refined aspects of his game, he could be a frightening prospect. I think people are wise to those kind of traits now. And in some of my earlier drafts last year, because he hadn't committed and because it wasn't known where he was going to play, he was still available this year going into his sophomore season. Now he is getting snapped up. It'll be absolute dynamite to see where he profiles going forward. Will he play more wide receiver? I think he likely will, given what they've lost. But he's also still listed on Fantrax for those college fantasy football players and Campus to Canton players as a tight end wide receiver dual position. So yeah, keep an eye on Nick Harbaugh. If it all clicks for him, he could be an absolute potential cheat code moving forward. Okay, right. Next one got difficult. Not all SEC schools are created equally, and trying to find somebody to really be excited about as a Devy prospect for the Mississippi State Bulldogs this year was tough. Even QB Will Rogers, who I was high on this time last year, has transferred out and will be plying his trade elsewhere this year. So really, it's barren. there wasn't much to get excited about. So for all of our British viewers, I thought I would just shout out pass catching tight end, hailing from London, England, Seydou Traore. As a freshman, played at Arkansas State and was the kind of main focal point in their passing attack. Shows good hands and good route running. Transferred to Mississippi State last year, but kind of caught himself in that weird kind of thing that Devontae Walker got himself caught up in, where technically I think people thought he'd transferred twice in a year, and he ended up sitting the season. But now he's in Mississippi State, he's fit, he's healthy, and should be an elite part of their passing attack. Listen, whether he goes on to be a legit Devy prospect, I don't know, but I promised you I was going to find a name. I was going to find someone for you to watch from every school. So why not go big, go British. He's playing for the Bulldogs, Seydou Traore. Just keep the name, just watch out for him when you're watching the kind of weekly roundup shows. How's our boy getting on? Okay, flying the flag over there in college football for Great Britain. Okay. Auburn, probably, again, not a great deal to get excited about, which for me as an Alabama fan is always absolutely brilliant. Obviously, Walker White is quite a highly touted QB prospect coming in this year as an incoming freshman. We don't expect him to play. Last season's starter, Peyton Thorne, is back and will resume the starter role, even though, as we've talked about previously, Walker White is probably the more talented player. There's that kind of hierarchy of time in the system and being rewarded for that that often is part of college football. Walker White will have to wait his turn, but he's an intriguing prospect, particularly when you pair him up with Perry Thompson. Again, good, kind of highly rated 4-star wide receiver prospect that Auburn managed to snag this year. Watching those two develop together in the future will be quite interesting. Sleeper, if you wanted one to look for, Jarquez Hunter at running back. Listen, the 2025 class is loaded. If he's on your Devy roster already, your process was good. He was quite highly recruited. He's not one of the standout guys at the moment amongst that class, but he could well see day 3 draft capital as it kind of projects at the moment. And, he's again, one that maybe does the job. If he's not already drafted in your Devy leagues, could well end up being a decent prospect for a rookie depleted draft. So a sleeper to keep your eye on this year in Jarquez Hunter. Okay. It's my turn now to get excited and talk Alabama football. And as you will see, like I said earlier, not all schools in the SEC are created equal. Alabama is a juggernaut, as we all know, and obviously has more guys for me to talk about, so much so that I even left names like Jam Miller off the list this year. To run through the list then, you've got Jalen Milroe, quarterback prospect, who we've talked about at length. Very mixed evaluation at the moment, but all the physical tools to be an electric dual threat. If his passing game improves and takes that next step this year, we could be looking at a potential kind of Jalen Hurts style quarterback. Justice Haynes and Richard Young, two very highly rated running backs that were incoming freshmen last year, going into their sophomore years, although Richard Young will be redshirting as a freshman. Daniel Hill and Kevin Riley, again, 2 top 10 running back recruits this year. Depending on which ranking site you use, very evenly matched. But Bama has that kind of pipeline for good running back prospects. They will have to wait their turn. But I saw them get drafted this year because everyone knows Alabama puts running backs in the league. If you watched our last show, the wide receiver show, you will have seen me get all sorts of gooey about Ryan Williams, the incoming freshman wide receiver at Alabama. Oh my gosh, and that is only happening more so now training camp footage is coming out. The kid just looks like he is going to be the business, and I am so excited. I took my only share with the 112 of my most recent Devy draft. It's the only share I've got, and I am absolutely delighted with it. It's just giving me the warm and fuzzies. I can't wait to bang on at you guys over the next 3 years about how good this kid is. Obviously, coming across with Coach DeBoer this year is Jamie Bernard, who's transferred from Washington, wide receiver in this year's cycle, where after the Elite Four guys, or including Ibuka with Evan Stewart, Ted McMillan, and Luther Burden, there is a bit of a drop off, and Jamie Bernard is very much part of that next mix. Keep an eye on how he does in that system as a reliable kind of transfer target for Jalen Milroe. Think about how Bryce Young and then Jalen Milroe benefited from a transfer player like Jermaine Burton. Look for a similar type impact from Jamie Bernard. Other wide receivers, Kirby Prentice, Jalen Hale. Interesting wide receiver / tight end prospect in Caleb Odom, who is an incoming freshman, recruited as a tight end, but looks like he's going to play some wide receiver for the Tide. How many snaps he gets this year remains to be seen, but an interesting prospect. Listen, let me just come back to those two 2026 running backs. I want to talk to you very quickly about Justice Haynes, because he is a name you will see skyrocketing. And been drafted incredibly highly now as an elite prospect. He hardly played all last year because the Tide didn't need him to, but he has got excellent contact balance, good vision as a route runner, and a runner out of the backfield. He makes decisive reads and cuts at the line of scrimmage. He's got elite kind of top end speed and burst. He's got an electronically timed 4.6 40-yard dash as a sophomore. He's going to be good. He's going to be really, really good. There are very few holes in his game. He was such a polished prospect coming in, and Bama could afford to let him develop in that incredibly talented room. Catches the ball well as a out the backfield as a receiver. He's a solid running back prospect with a high floor. He will play Sundays eventually, no doubt about it. But I just, that said, I didn't want to ignore Richard Young, another really highly recruited 5-star running back in last year's class. And I think just because of the hype that Justice Haynes got, and quite rightly so, don't get me wrong, people forgot about Richard Young. In the spring game this year, he looked like a really, really good player. And I mentioned him previously on our Sell, Keep, Acquire section as a guy that I would be going out and seeing if he's drafted, first of all. Likely is, because he's a 5-star running back that are committed to Alabama, but he's a guy that, because he's so far down the pecking order, kind of out of sight, out of mind, people will now be hearing the buzz around Justice Haynes and might be willing to sell low on Richard Young. Go out and ask the question. You won't regret it, I promise you. So yeah, listen, I could talk about the Tide all day. Roll Tide. It's going to be a great season incoming. And, who said Kalen DeBoer couldn't recruit, because the future's looking bright for the Tide as well, with the crop coming in the following year. But now's not the time to talk about that. But yeah, Roll Tide. And from the haves to the have-nots. Listen, again, I promised you I was going to find you a name for every team. Now, listen, Vanderbilt are the SEC's whipping boys and have been for a long, long time. But that's not to say that they don't find talented players. A couple of years ago, Ray Davis was playing for them before he transferred out for his senior season to boost his stock before coming an NFL running back. This year, the cupboard is about as bare as it gets. To make matters worse, last year's starting quarterback and top 4 wide receivers, including Will Shepherd, who has transferred to Coach Prime in Colorado, all left via the transfer portal. And Vanderbilt have installed a new offensive coordinator. They're looking at changing the system this year. And they've not got a lot to shout about. So I went away and found a guy. Look, he's going to be available in every league. The way their offense is structured this year, a lot of the passing attack, because of the top 4 receivers all leaving, will probably run through the tight ends. So I just want to bring your attention to Cole Spence. Now, Cole Spence is 6'7". He is a big guy, 243 pounds. And he is a good pass catcher. He put on tape some decent catches as a freshman, but then missed all of his sophomore season to a torn ACL last preseason. Will he do anything? Will he make any waves? Maybe not, but I promised you I would find you someone to get excited about for each team. That proved quite hard in Vanderbilt's case. It's going to be a tough year if you're a Commodores fan. I don't know many of you, respectfully. But listen, get excited about Cole Spence. And if I'm right, let's nail this one to the mast now. Let's nail Cole Spence as my guy and deep sleeper to look out for. All right. I'm going to be rooting for him this year. Let's see how he gets on. Might come to nothing, but if it hits, I'm claiming it big time. Okay. So moving on from Vanderbilt, like I said, not a great deal to talk about. Let's go to Oxford, Missouri, and talk about Ole Miss, Missouri, Mississippi. The Rebels have got some interesting names to watch out for, starting with 3 guys who should get day 2 or higher draft capital this year. Talking about QB Jackson Dart, a name that I've mentioned a lot. You should know by now I'm a Jackson Dart fan, and I love what they've done this year to support him in trying to secure that round 1 draft capital. Trey Harris returns, good vertical guy on the outside. We've talked about him previously on various shows that we've done. But they added Juice Wells in the transfer portal. Now, going into last year, Juice Wells was one of the highest rated SEC wide receivers. He was expected to go out there and show off and be a potential high day 2, day 1 wide receiver taken in this year's draft class. However, injuries pretty much shut him down for the entire year. But do not forget about his talent. As a 1-2 punch to combine at wide receiver for Jackson Dart, they are putting all 3 guys in the shop window, and they will see a lot of interest from scouts, NFL scouts this year, going to watch this Ole Miss team, particularly as they've lost workhorse running back Quinshon Judkins to Ohio State. What that does then is it probably changes the focus of the way these guys are going to work. A lot more of this is going to go through Jackson Dart as a passer, utilizing the unique skill sets of Juice Wells and Trey Harris, who complement each other really nicely. I am excited to watch these guys last year. I want to be proved right on all my Juice Wells takes. He's a guy that I want to pull for. He's got an incredible story. And Trey Harris, again, all the potential in the world to be a day 2 guy in next year's NFL draft. One guy I want to bring your attention to as well as a kind of sleeper, Ulysses Bentley IV is a nice running back prospect. Obviously, nobody quite foresaw the breakout that Quinshon Judkins was going to have to becoming one of the elite Devy running backs as a freshman. He's gone now, and Ulysses Bentley has stayed. He's going into his 5th year, his senior season, at Ole Miss, and should take a significant chunk of that workload now in the rushing game that has been vacated by Quinshon Judkins. He's a guy, again, listen, you might have drafted him a couple of years back up and he was going to be something. You probably lost all hope when Judkins kind of burst onto the scene and became the dominant running back that he was. But now he's gone. Ulysses Bentley could work his way again into a day 3 NFL running back or UDFA that might be worth, if he's not already drafted by somebody in your deeper leagues, he might well be worth a depleted rookie pick or a late pick next year, depending on how his season goes. So again, know the name, get to learn it. If you don't know much about him, just scribble it down and thank me later. All right. So moving on to Arkansas. Again, the haves and the have-nots. There's not a great deal to write home about for the Razorbacks. Jaquindon Jackson, a Jag running back, on the 2025 scene. not one of the higher ranked prospects. But again, if he has a good season, keep your eye on him for your depleted Devy drafts. The guy I want to talk about from Arkansas is Luke Haas. And Luke Haas broke onto the scene last year as an exciting tight end talent. And it's really interesting, isn't it? We talk all the time, and you've heard me say this to you guys. In Devy, we are always looking for the next one. We like to copycat things we've seen and get excited about guys who profile like people who have just hit big. And obviously, Brock Bowers has gone into the league this year as a pass catching phenomenon at tight end. And the way Georgia lined him up, he could do a bit of everything, but the pass catching savvy and chops was so exciting. So, of course, everyone's now looking for the next Brock Bowers, and there he could be. Okay, now, listen, I say that kind of slightly tongue in cheek. Obviously, Brock Bowers is an elite prospect, but the way Luke Haas started last season as a true freshman, it might be the closest thing we have to a player who burst onto the scene as a tight end freshman like Brock Bowers did. Haas was off to an absolute tear. Through 5 games last season, he had 253 yards and 3 touchdowns in an offense that isn't all that explosive and all that exciting. Okay, it was led by KJ Jefferson last year, who struggled greatly, but also did a lot of the work for their offense with his legs. And Haas just, he was exciting. Like, the catches were good, really good, hands good, route running, a lot to get excited about and pull for. But then after 5 games, he suffered a broken collarbone, so they shut him down for the rest of the season. Listen, he has major upside. Only taken right now in some of the deepest drafts because a lot of guys forgot about him. Like, he came onto the scene at such a kind of exciting kind of breakout potential and then broke the collarbone. So kind of fell off people's radar again. I was absolutely delighted to snag him in the 6th round of a 10-round Devy draft recently. And I'm really glad he's on my team and no one else's. It could come back down to earth with a bump. He could go on and be the next kind of elite pass catching tight end prospect. Who knows? But at that type of draft capital, I was really happy to take that chance. So yeah, look out for the name. Hopefully he bounces back this season. That leads me then to our last kind of couple of teams. The incoming SEC teams in Texas and Oklahoma. Now, Texas, again, you want to talk about the haves and the have-nots. Texas are one of college football's haves. And as you can see there, the rich stay rich in college football. And when we want to talk about rich and NIL money, okay, Texas not only recruit at an insane level, but they can take in transfers from other programs as well to strengthen their ranks. Listen, they're going to go out and they're going to attack the SEC this year. They're certainly not going to be scared of it. And you can see across the next 3 years, the pipeline is stacked with Devy potential. We've talked a lot about Quinn Ewers and what he needs to show us this year as a likely round 1 NFL draft quarterback taken up in lots of Devy drafts. But then they're loaded at receiver. They took Isaiah Bond from Alabama in the transfer portal. Listen, putting 2 and 2 together, the guy has just signed an NIL deal with Lamborghini. When your players are getting that type of NIL opportunity at Texas, listen, I can't even blame them for leaving Alabama. But, listen, enough said. Isaiah Bond, another one of those wide receivers, just that cut below the top guys, the top 4 guys. He's probably making a push for the wide receiver 5, like the top end of that next guy set of guys after your McMillan, Burden, Stewart, and Egbuka. You've also got Matthew Golden and Jonte Cook, who pack that wide receiver room. Incoming freshman Ryan Winger, who I told you about last time and then kind of didn't tell you about because I'd not watched as much of him as I wanted to. Bruising physical runner, kind of Debo-esque in style in terms of the yards after the catch. Like I said about him, He's not going to play a great deal this year. As you can see, that wide receiver room is loaded. But there will be a game that he wins them next year out of nowhere. You can kind of see, you can perceive this kind of backs to the wall situation. Texas are down, fourth quarter comeback is on, and it's Ryan Wingo who pops up out of nowhere and leads them to it. I can just see it coming. But then, listen, again, the rich stay rich. They're loaded at running back as well. For all 3 years, Jaden Blue was a big guy in Devy circles a couple of seasons ago. Should take significant snaps this year in that backfield. Now Jonathan Brooks is out of the way, but he'll split those snaps with Cedric Baxter, elite 5-star running back prospect, who put up decent numbers as a freshman on a limited workload. You've then got Jarrett Gibson, another highly ranked recruit as an incoming freshman this year. So look, it's absolutely loaded. The player I want to talk about, though, for a couple of minutes, if I may, is Arch Manning. Now, listen, this is a name we all know. Arch Manning being at Texas behind Quinn Ewers is one of the most hyped up and talked about stories in Devy circles and college football because of the dynamics it creates in that QB room. Obviously, Quinn Ewers is hoping to go into the draft as a round one quarterback this year. And then Arch is just sat biding his time and waiting. So you know the name, you know how high the hype is, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about what he's put on tape as a prospect, because that might be the bit you don't know, because obviously we've not seen a great deal. First of all, he has got a lightning fast release and absolutely no wasted throwing motion in his mechanics. He has got elite arm power, and if you give him time, in the pocket, he has got the ability to absolutely carve teams up. He's got great field vision and awareness, and the ability, moreover, to find his receivers open downfield. He's got polished footwork, and he's no slouch either. Listen, he's not a dual threat QB. He's not going to be someone who you design rushing plays for. But he has got sneaky footwork and capability. Like if he scrambles out the pocket and it has to become a scramble, tuck the ball down, he can pick you yards up. He's not like his Uncle Peyton. He's not a statue in the pocket. He's kind of developed with the way that QB players developed. And he can kind of secure you extra yards with his legs if he needs to. Look, one of the reasons he's such an intriguing prospect is the privacy. There's an air of mystery around Arch Manning. As a high school player, he didn't talk to the media. He didn't have social media. And so there was this kind of intrigue. The only thing you saw was what he put on tape on Friday nights. And again, last year, he didn't do a great deal of talking. He didn't do a great deal of talking until, this year, as a sophomore, in the spring game, he kind of got his first exposure and prolonged, extensive kind of game action, if you like. He played in Texas's orange and white game, and threw a 75-yard touchdown pass on his first passing attempt. Now, if you want to get those Texas fans excited, like that play just went viral instantly. Like, boom, here he is. Here's Arch Manning. You've known about him as a high school recruit, kind of shrouded in mystery. We sat him last year and he hardly touched a football in his freshman season. Boom, here he is. It went viral and the world went nuts because all of a sudden that hype looks like it's going to be justified. He started 10 for 10 in the spring game and finished the first half of action with 11 for 13, 189 yards and 2 touchdowns. His first incompletion came with 12 seconds left in that second quarter. A throw into the end zone that bounced off the hands of Isaiah Bond. So it wasn't even like it was an errant throw. It was there. It was good. Isaiah Bond, for all that NIL money, he was probably too busy drooling over and counting, dropped it. So listen, the hype is real. Like, Texas didn't provide any official stats from the day, but ESPN reported that he finished with 355 yards and 3 touchdowns and just 1 interception, whilst completing 19 of 26 passes. And they did go on to note that at least 4 of his incompletions were catchable passes. Look, the hype is real. If you didn't get him in a startup, you've got no chance of getting him now because people aren't going to sell him. If you earn him and you're stacked at quarterback, you could sell him for an absolute king's ransom because that is what he is going to demand. I know that's a strategy that Jack has talked about a lot that might really be worth doing. But look, you could just as well keep him. He is probably going to go to the league. He's probably going to be a round 1, top 3 pick if everything goes to plan. And it looks like the hype is real. Okay, he'll do it his way. If he decides, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't start for a year. If he decided to then come back for the 2026 season and declare for the 2027 draft, because he will be getting the best advice behind closed doors from Uncle Eli and Uncle Peyton, and people who know the elite level of the game best. And he's a smart cookie. That's the one thing that people do say about him. Intelligent. And will make the right business decisions to make sure that he puts himself in the best position possible. So I think I've hyped up Texas long enough. It kind of made me feel a little bit ill inside. Let's move on finally then to our other incoming team this year for the SEC, and Oklahoma. Oklahoma have got a couple of interesting prospects in the short term. 2 wide receivers who will be hoping to secure day 2 draft capital. I think they're definite draftable prospects at the moment in Nick Anderson and Dion Burks. I'm higher on Nick Anderson than Jack is. Jack sees some traits he's not too keen on. Listen, I think he could well put himself with a good season this year into day 2 consideration. What it does do is it gives QB Jackson Arnold 2 really good, reliable weapons this year. Jackson Arnold sat last year. He was again, a high recruit and quite a scoop for Oklahoma to pick up last year. Recruited amongst the likes of Arch Manning and Nico. He was a buzzy prospect, was Jackson Arnold. And he sat last year as a freshman behind Dylan Gabriel, who has obviously gone to Oregon. So this year, Arnold has been handed the keys. Interestingly, he was the most productive in terms of high school stats of those kind of big 3 in Arch and Nika, and then obviously the Malachi Nelsons of this world. Yet he played at the highest level. He was a Texas boy, played elite high school football at Texas. So he put up some monster numbers in elite competition. He is a tough, live-armed QB, and deserved to be ranked amongst those top guys. He's got a strong arm, generates velocity on intermediate throws and downfield throws. He's light-footed. He escapes pressure and makes plays out of the pocket. I'm really excited to watch him this year. Really excited. He's probably cheaper right now than Arch Manning and Nico, but stands a great deal of, a great chance of joining them in round 1 of the NFL draft and a likely round 1 Devy pick if everything, dynasty pick for non-Devy leagues, the way things are moving going forward. A couple of other names to shout out then. Gavin Sawchuk, underrated running back prospect again. Eligibility left, first eligible for the draft this year. But could come back next year if he doesn't like the buzz that he's getting. I like him, underrated prospect. And Javonte Barnes, good pass-catching running back. I have him in a couple of really deep leagues. More of a pass-catching, third down guy than a between-the-tackles thumper. But a name to keep an eye on this year as Oklahoma move across to the SEC. So, there you have it. I promised you there would be players to get excited about from every single school. I think I did a job of getting those names across there. The SEC, listen, is where the big boys play. It is the elite conference where a lot of elite prospects go to cut their teeth. Guys transfer in the hope of boosting their NFL draft stock because they know the SEC turns out NFL-ready players. Keep watching. We will, as soon as the SEC season starts, and so all the college football season starts in less than 30 days, we will be on it for you. We will be covering it over on X, which just means it's finally time for me to shout out where you can follow us on X. You can follow us at Wildcard Devy. Follow all our content. The more college football gets rolling, the more content we'll be producing. We'll get back to our top 5 lists. We'll have our weekly ones to watch and helping you look out for some of the names we've mentioned tonight, perhaps. We'll tell you the matchups, where they're going to be, why you should be watching those players. That's Jack and myself at Wildcard Devy, but you can also follow the rest of the crew, okay, on at Fantasy Wildcard on X and YouTube. The team are putting out amazing content every single week for your fantasy football goodness. All right, the Dynasty Show with Kev and the guys, the Rewind Show with the awesome Paul, Lewis, and Hannah. Okay, guys, we're taking over. Fantasy Wildcard is taking over, and you should come along for the ride. Okay. We'll see you in a fortnight's time. I will be on my holiday in a fortnight's time, and Jack will be running solo to talk the Big 12 and the Big 12, the Big 10. And then we'll get back together to give you, on the eve of college football season, we'll give you a kind of more gentle breakdown of some of the other conferences for your ears. Okay. Until then, all right. Peace.